Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from dcx coming to you live with another webinar. This one will be a little bit longer than usual because I really want to talk more in depth today about Figma and Axure. It's July 2024, and obviously, Figma is very popular at various companies for various reasons. I'll turn down my mic a little bit. But a lot of people have been concerned about some of what's going on at Figma. What does the future hold? Are they designing more for what product managers want than what designers want? And are they headed towards a future where maybe designers are less needed because the AI will do things? We don't know, but we have some hints, and so people have some questions. And I think in general, Axure is a super interesting option. And of course, I want to mention today, not sponsored. I pay Axure, they don't pay me. Sad but true. I am one of their recommended trainers. You can find hours of my video lessons on my other YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for dcx Axure, and I'm sure it'll come up. So today I'm going to open up Axure, and I am going to live design right in Axure. And if you are watching live, feel free to post something that you want to see me do or that you have a question about, because we're going to be looking at, can Axure do the things that Figma can do, and is Axure easy to learn? Because the things I hear the most from people who are less familiar with Axure are, well, Axure can't do what Figma can do. And of course, you also hear, oh, Axure, the learning curve is just too steep. And so let's address those today. Now, again, note that it is July 2024. Axure is working on version 11. No one has seen it. I'm going to be in version 10. And Figma, I'm not going to open up. We're just going to talk about Axure today. And a quick thank you to everybody who makes these happen. Thanks to all of my past, current, and future Patreon members, especially our paid Patreon members. Thank you very much. Some of you have upgraded and downgraded since my list on the screen. The people are moving in all directions. But hey, as long as you're a member, even at the free level, I'm happy to see you there. So check dcx.to for all of our links to all of the dcx multiverse. So I am going to start sharing my screen in a moment. So if you are joining live, just say hi. Let me know where you're joining from. I want to make sure my live chat is working while I queue up some windows that I wanted to have open for our purposes. Okay, I've got my browser ready, and I've got Axure ready, and I've got the chat room ready. So let's see. Hopefully we've got everything coming up. Let's see. Okay, I'm live. And the YouTubers, okay, I see a few people joining live on YouTube. I guess too shy to say hello, but hello to you. Okay, so let me get ready to share my screen. All right, Charlene is waving. Yay, we've got a live one. Okay, so let's jump to my screen share, which you know is always awkward because you get to see the sausage being made. By the way, the gong is going to go off today an hour in. I forgot to set it for longer. I'm happy to stay here up to 2 hours to make sure I answer your questions about Axure so we can see what's up. It's Chantel P. How are you? All right, so let's. I've done almost no preparation because I wanted people to see me using Axure live. I didn't want it to look like I had pre-prepared files and things. I wanted you to see it from the start. And this is a link to my Axure courses on YouTube. They're totally free, so you can learn my core skills course, which is my beginner and intermediate stuff. And then I've got a 3-hour video with some of my advanced techniques as well. So check that out. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is styling. A lot of what people love about Figma has to do with styling, where you can create styles and colors and apply these things and create a design system. And I want to start by saying that there's a lot of that Axure can do, but honestly, at this point, Figma does it better. But there are plenty of other things that Axure does better. So hopefully by the end of this, you're going to go, and hopefully curious for what Axure 11 might bring, which they haven't shown me, so I don't know, but I always hope it's an improvement to styles because Figma is quite strong there. I mean, to me, that might be Figma's strongest feature, but you tell me your favorite Figma feature in the chat. Okay, so how do we do styles in Axure? So there's two main ways to style things. You can style them manually. So let's say I drag a box onto my canvas. Over on the right side, I have a pane. Looks similar but not identical to Figma, and I can create a lot of different styles. I can say that the box has a certain size and rotation, and it's got a border, and it's got a fill color. So I can come in here and I can grab some of these things. So, oop, I clicked away from it, sorry. We'll give it a thick border just to be silly, and I can give it a fill color. Okay, so I like to make things ugly just for the purposes of teaching. Hooray! We can see your LinkedIn tab. Oh, that's not right. Okay, that's my LinkedIn tab. Give me a moment to share my screen a little bit differently. Thank you, Charlene, because I was building stuff in Axure and nobody would know. All right, let's try display one. Let's see. Oh. Oh, no, hold on. Screen one. I tested this before. Give me 1 minute to try to teach my system to show a different screen. Desktop, display one. Okay. All right. I think that's an upgrade. Okay, so thank you, Charlene. Yeah, that was my LinkedIn. Luckily, no private messages there, just my feed. Hopefully now you're seeing my vMix window. So you know that it's sharing my active screen. And let's see, I can also turn off the countdown, though you are going to hear the gong. So everybody should now be seeing my vMix screen. And then when I flip over to Axure, you should be seeing my Axure screen. And all I did so far was drag out a rectangle and show you how here on the right side style tab, let me pull up my own YouTube video and make sure this is looking better. Yeah, there we go. There's Axure. So all I did was just show you that over here on the right side, thank you, Charlene, always saving my butt, that there's a lot of style options here that some are similar to Figma, some are different. They might be in different places, but I filled it with a cyan color. I gave it a pink border of 4. That's all you missed so far, not much. So you can style things manually, but to me, that's a mistake because one of the places where Axure shines, though has room for improvement, is global styles. And the old Axure tutorials didn't even have a tutorial on this, so a lot of people didn't know it existed, so they got very frustrated with having to manually style something every time they brought it out or copy and paste it. So global styles live up here where you can see manage widget styles, and I can create my own styles or I can change the defaults. Now the defaults are just for this Axure file. It's not going to be for every Axure file. It's not that global. It's global to this file. So no matter how many screens or pages I design, these styles are global to this file, not to my account or team. Maybe we'll see that in Axure 11, but I can't say. So let's say, for example, we have a primary button. By default, the button is a blue button with white text, with no border, with rounded corners of 5. So let's see, what does that look like? So that means that by default, we can grab this primary button. We can drag it out. I'll get rid of this silly rectangle. So I'm just dragging out a primary button. And that's what it looks like. It's got rounded corners. It's blue. It's got white text. And we can go into the global style thing and we can either adjust that, so every time we drag out a primary button it has a different look, or we can make a separate style. I'll show you both quickly. So let's say that we want our button to be dark green. Not great for color blindness, but let's pretend. Let's say that we wanted our font to be let's pick something everyone hates, Comic Sans. Let's give it a border, and the line color will be, let's pick something weird, orange, just so you can't miss it. Bold, and let's up the font size. 18. So we're saying every time someone grabs the primary button in this Axure file, we want it to look like this. Let's make the corners more round. Okay. So now we have a green Comic Sans button with more rounded corners, with white text, with the yellow stroke. And if I pull out another primary button, now it looks the same. But again, you didn't have to do that. You could have left the primary button the way it was, and you can always invent your own style. So I can say add, and let's say this is the Deb button style, and we'll say this is and I can pick some colors. 366295 is Delta CX blue. So I can say that's the fill color. The font color will be white. Wouldn't make sense to put black on a dark blue button. And we'll just go with some normal stuff right now just to speed this up. So black text, no border, and rounded corners. Let's make them super round. 21. All right, so that's the Deb button. But we didn't say that this button is a Deb button. This button is still a primary button. How do we know? It says it over here in the top left. And if you look over here where it says widget style, so Axure always has a lot of places where you can do the same thing. It's not, there's always multiple ways. So if I say this is a Deb button, now it says, oh yeah, the Deb button, that's blue with no outline, with this font, with whatever. And so that way you can apply this style to any shape, or as Axure calls them, widget, that would get that style. So that means it could be buttons, it could be other things. Let's pretend, for example, that Deb button is the hover state of green button. So I can go over to green button, and I can go to interactions, and I can go to shape properties. And you can see there's a style effect. So a mouse over, an error state, a focus state, things like that are style effects. So I think Figma calls these variants, but Axure calls these style effects because it's the effect of an action happening to a widget or a shape. So if I mouse over, and again, not great for accessibility or mobile, but let's pretend we believe in hovers, and I don't have to manually style it. I can pick from one of my global styles. We'll pick the Deb button. Okay, so if we want to preview this, I've got this screen ready to go. And now when I hover, I get the Deb button. Now notice two things. Notice the font is bigger and the outline is yellow. Why? Because the style from the green button overrides what's in here if we don't give it a specific instruction. So for example, there was no specific instruction in the style for the outline or the font size. So it inherits that outline and font size. Let me show you what I mean. So if we go back to this Deb button, we can see we didn't say the size. So Axure says, well, the button before you did the hover was 18. We'll just leave it. You didn't tell us to change it. This isn't selected. Okay, fine. Border thickness. You didn't tell us that the border is 0 or 4 or whatever. So we just inherited it. We kept it. If you want to be more specific, we could then change it where this border is 0, just so we can see this in action, and this font size is 13. This doesn't make sense design-wise, but I'm just showing you how it works. Refresh. And now that hover state follows the style you were trying to create. It will always be consistent. And again, the nice thing about the global styles is that if you've dragged a whole bunch of buttons out, and then you need to change a button where someone says, hey, wait a minute, you made a green button with a yellow outline? That's terrible. Make a green button with a black outline. I can go, oh, okay, hold on. Black outline. Okay. And everywhere in your document, so again, not other documents, not up on a cloud as far as I know, but everywhere in your document, that button will now change. And in Axure, you can create libraries. This is similar to Figma's design system, though again, not built out as far, in that I think Figma's is more cloud-based and it can go across multiple files. Axure libraries can go across multiple files, but I still don't think they're as flexible as Figma's. So again, this is one area where Axure does a good job, where Figma probably does a great job. But we're going to see some more examples in our time today where it's quite the opposite. So as I'm going, any questions from our live viewers, and if you're watching the video later, put something in the comments and I'll answer. Any questions about the styling in Axure as I make a couple of more styles and show you some more examples? So for example, let's say we have a header 3, and we might say, hey, wait a minute, that's not really what our H3s look like. We want to make sure that our header 3 is Nunito. It's going to be 18. It's going to be black. Doesn't need a border. There's no box around it. So sure, border thickness 0. It's already got, okay, so we already picked black. We don't need to bold it. And go. So that means that every time we drag header 3 out, that's the type we're going to get. And again, if you want a paragraph, we'll drag out just a paragraph. Now, notice this paragraph is Arial. By default, a lot of our stuff was Arial. And you might say, Deb, our official font is Nunito. We don't want everything to be Arial by default. No problem. Just come back into your global widget styling, and up here you'll see default. And all you have to do is set some defaults. So, and then everything will inherit from here. So by default, we're Nunito. I never want to see a font size smaller than 15, 16, you know, however your company does it, 14, whatever it might be. Font color, we use black or almost black or whatever it might be. And by default, I want no borders on stuff. And these are my defaults. But I'm going to leave the border on stuff for now. So now you can see that automatically changed this paragraph to Nunito. How do we know? It's up here in our bar. And that way you can set those defaults. But if, for example, your headers are maybe a different font because your style guide has 2 different fonts, you can always come back in here and say, okay, look, for the heading, I know I've got Nunito here, but we're going to use, I'll just pick something wacky, Merriweather. Okay, so we'll have Merriweather as the heading. Nunito will be the body copy. And so you have total control over these styles. You can control the colors, you can control the styles. There's nothing built into here about spacing. It's really just about the font. You can put in some spacing actually, but this is the way it looks. So we can do fill color, font, the typeface, which would be usually a weight, font size, font color, opacity. Makes more sense for shapes and maybe backgrounds or overlays than necessarily a font. Bold, italic, underline. I do still recommend underlining for text links. That is best for accessibility. Line color is going to be the color of a stroke or a border. Border thickness, border pattern, so you can have dotted lines. Border visibility, so if you only want to have certain things be lines on a thing, it's a rectangle with no top. There you go. Corner radius, corner visibility, so which corners are straight and which are curved. Outer shadow, inner shadow, these are very simple in Axure. Your shadows are quite simple. These aren't like very advanced. You're not going to feel like you're in a professional, this isn't Photoshop. Text shadow, how is the text aligned for the box that it lives in? So centered, middle, some padding. So again, you're not totally controlling the spacing between elements, but within the box, do you want there to be padding? Line spacing, character spacing, strike through, baseline, image filter, or even an image background for a box. So notice also here you have things like form hint, form disabled. Let me show you what that looks like. Let's say we have a standard Axure text field. Right away, as of July 2024, we've just killed Figma because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that Figma still does not make it easy, without a lot of workarounds, to type text in a box. Whereas in Axure, it's just a default widget. I can just come straight here and type text in a box. And so that means we have a lot more flexibility if we are going to usability test something, and it includes onboarding or signing up or filling out a form or other actions. Chances are someone has to type something somewhere. Axure is ready for that, and we can style this if we want. It doesn't have to have a hard box around it. It can have a rounded rectangle. It can have more spacing. It can have a different font. All of that is done over in our styling. So we might say, hey, by default, when we have a text field, we want it to, let's say I still use font color black, and let's say we've got our border. Let's say it's a gray border, left justified, center. Let's say we have some padding, padding of 10, and let's see how that looks. And let's say I make this a little bit bigger, height of 40. And, oh, I forgot to give it some rounded corners so it looks a little more modern, but of course you can have the other style if you like. Alrighty, let's take a look at how that looks. Refresh. So this is now here, and because I did left padding, the box will start its typing 10 pixels from the left boundary. Because I did left padding of 10, you can control that. Control this. So that's how this looks. This looks more like a nice, nicely designed text field, but there's more that we can do with a text field. Notice we've got hint style, disabled style. So we can use our global styles to say, when this is disabled and people can't type in it, what does it look like? It looks like it has this color stroke. It has this color fill. It's grayed out, so it has a gray background. So you can do that however you want. You can also do hint text. So first name. Hide it after people start typing. Okay, let's try that out. Refresh. So it says first name. When I click in it, it still says first name because we didn't have the hint hidden until I start typing. And then when I type, I get that. If I delete it, the hint comes back. And again, some people are saying don't use field hints as much. It's not good for accessibility. Put all of this information outside the box. I'm totally with you there. But if you did want to have something act as a field hint, you can. Totally up to you. If we say that this is disabled, notice this checkbox down here. Disabled. It will then enact whatever is the disabled style. Where did it get the disabled style? Let's take a look. Widget style, form disabled. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, the more I use Figma, the more I miss Axure. Yeah. So here is form disabled. And just to be silly, I'm going to say a disabled form is chartreuse, or whatever lemony yellow color that is. So that way we can see by default we said this was disabled. Now notice that not only does disabled change the look of it, but I can't click in it. I can't click in it, I can't type in it. So not only does Axure understand that it's disabled and to give you a visual style of what our disabled form field looks like, but also don't let you type in it. And so let's say we want to enable it. And one of my favorite lessons that you'll see if you watch my videos is, let's grab this checkbox. And this is the I agree to terms checkbox, right? Because who doesn't agree to the terms, right? I'll just put it over here. Forget my bad design. These would probably be left justified, but I have this wacky paragraph over here. I always make wacky, messy screens. And let's give this a quick name. This will be our first name input. Okay, so I can teach Axure. Here's an interaction. New interaction. When this is selected, which means the box is checked, enable the first name input. Okay. So that was how easy it was to make an interaction in Axure, and there's a lightning bolt here to remind us that we made something happen. There's an action here. So we can say by default, this is a disabled field. Oh, they're going to agree to the terms? Then now we're going to let them fill it out. Now, we don't have it doing the opposite. We don't have it where they go, ha, I don't agree to the terms, and we disable that. But again, these are some things that you can start to build in Axure when you start to get into some of your prototyping, which again, you can easily learn from my Axure lessons. I've got, 16 hours of Axure lessons up on YouTube. I'm not going through all 16 today. We're just going to hit some high notes, especially for people who are Figma fans. So I wanted to make sure that people knew about manual styling. I wanted to make sure you knew about global styling. Any questions about styling in Axure, especially those of you who might be coming from Figma? Let me know if you have questions, because we're live and I am happy to answer questions. To kind of foresee some questions, as of now, you cannot nest styles, so styles don't inherit from each other than the default. I think that's a mistake. I think Axure should create nested styles or styles that inherit from each other, but that currently does not exist. So hypothetically, if you used a certain color in multiple styles, and then your company changed that color, you would have to find all of the styles using that color and go in and change that color. But at least the good part is, because these are global styles, once you've done that, it's done for your file. Paul's asking about components. I'll be going through that as my third thing today. So good question. And yes, if you are using Axure's global styles in a component, which is similar to a Figma component, it's a pre-made thing that you use over and over and over. If you change something in a global style in a component, it will change everywhere that component was used. So we'll look at components today as well. I just have that third on my list. So pros and cons to the way Axure approached styling. The downside is Axure styling predates Figma's. So it's not like Axure saw what Figma was doing and built this not as good version. Axure styling came before Figma even existed, and so that's why Figma's a little bit stronger there. Chantel says, do you know if you can import a library from Figma and Axure inherits the triggers and style? So Axure triggers work different from Figma. I know there is a Figma and Axure plugin that there's supposed to be ways to import a Figma file to Axure. I have not tried this, and so I would say it's worth trying for you to answer that question best for yourself, because I don't know. Next, I'm going to show you an example of an Axure trigger so you can see how different it is from Figma. So that's why my guess is I'm not sure that it'll work. So why is that? Because in Figma, you can have one page, and you can have an entire website on one page, and you just made artboards. And so this screen is over here, and then this next screen is over here, and this next screen is over here, and then you have these things that kind of move you from this artboard to this artboard to this artboard. Axure doesn't do that. Axure predates Figma. So Axure was thinking more in terms of web pages. People want to move from one page or screen to another. So this is the way that Axure does it. And that's why I've got my next lesson here for you called click-through model. So let's imagine that when we click this submit button, we're going to move back to the styles page, and the styles page is the one we were just playing in. So notice I have both of these pages open, so they're both up here in this bar. This is our styles page. This is our click-through model page. When we click submit, we want people to go to the styles page. So you're not clicking and making an arrow. You're not doing it the way that people used to Figma or Adobe XD have made it. This is thinking more of each thing as a discrete web page. So all I have to do is come into new interaction. So think about where the action is happening. It's going to happen on the submit button. So I come here to the interactions pane. I say new interaction. So what sparks this? Is it a hover? Is it a mouse click? Is it a long click? Is it a double click? So notice when you start to think about it, you can build a lot more stuff in Axure, especially if you're thinking about something that might be a desktop client where you have a right click or what we call the context menu, or I think it's a control click in Mac, a long click. So there's a lot more that you can do here, but most of your stuff will be a single click or a finger tap. So Axure says, okay, when people click or tap, what should happen? That was our event. It triggered something to happen. Now, what's the action, the lightning bolt? Open link. Okay, where are we going? You can go to another page in this Axure file, or you can go to an external URL. So if you really want something to be realistic, you can say clicking on this button goes to the dcx website, and it really will, because you're live on the web. So I can do that, or I can say no. Clicking this button goes to styles. And then you have some options. Should it open in the current window? Should it open in a new tab? Stuff like that. But that's all I have to do. So that's kind of the equivalent of that kind of, draw this link from here to here or create this trigger. So now if we want to refresh this, now I'm on the styles page. I'll need to move to our exciting click-through model page. Notice when I mouse over submit, I now get the hand mouse thing because there's an action here. This is linked and the system recognizes that. This is just text right now. The system recognizes it's text. I get an I-bar, but I don't get the hand. So when I click submit, boom, I go to the styles page. So remember, Axure is not working in artboards. Your entire design is not going to be on one page. Anything that is a separate page is going to be treated as a page. So for some people, that's going to make more sense. And for some people who are used to artboards, that's going to be something to get used to. So really depends on style. For me, I don't think in artboards. I think in pages. These are all web pages or screens of a client or a kiosk. And so to me, this makes more sense. The artboard thing makes less sense. But that's just me. So we can do the same thing with a text link. We can link the text to wherever we want it to go. And another thing to think about is, remember, just like Figma has pages and then all of your layers, Axure does the same thing. So we can just go to outline and Axure says, look, this is everything you've put on this particular page. You've got a submit button, you've got some text that says text link, and notice when I mouse over it, it shows me a preview of what it is, so it's this text link. You've got a drop list, which I'll talk about in a moment, and you've got some text that says this. You also have the option in Axure to give stuff names. So if you want to be able to find something later or remember something later, or you've got lots of different buttons on the page and you want to make sure you can easily tell them apart, maybe this is the log in button. And that way, if you've got different buttons on the page, here it is. Now Axure says, look, it's the login button. It is technically a rectangle. And when you mouse over it, we're showing you which one it happens to be. Now let's talk about drop lists for a moment. Now Axure has a default drop list. Let's make this a little bit bigger. By default, there's not a lot of styling you can do to make this prettier. This is a medium fidelity drop list. It's not sketched, but it's not super designed. It doesn't have our company colors, and we can give it our company font. Like you can see up here, I can go in here and I can give it some of the styling, but I don't have a huge amount of control over it. But that's okay, because in my lessons, I show you how to build a drop list from scratch with some Axure components, and that way you've total control over the visual design and the behavior of the drop list. So again, Axure is going to definitely be for people who want that more granular control of stuff. But let's say we have a drop list. This is just a standard drop list. If I double click on it, Axure says, what do you want in here? And I go, oh yeah, sure. These are going to be choices. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe at the top it says select one. All right, and the check boxes are which one do you want to be seen by default. If your top one is not your choice, fine. Now, again, we could style this a little bit. I can come in here and I could say, ooh, this needs a little left padding. That was really too close to the line. I want to pretty this up a little bit. Here we go. All right, so it's not the prettiest, but it'll function. So let's take a look at how that looks. We're on the click-through model page, and this is just a standard drop list. I'm on Windows. This is Chrome. It will look like a Windows Chrome drop list. If you're on Mac or Safari, it's going to look a little different, but notice I don't have a lot of options here. I couldn't do, I don't have a lot of styling options, which is why I have a separate lesson on this, but because Axure has conditional logic, and again, this is where we start to get into a little bit of that learning curve, but if you've learned Figma's stuff, you can learn Axure stuff. Yeah, I mean, the advanced stuff in Axure, okay, it takes a little bit more time, more advanced, even though we'll do some advanced stuff today just for fun, but this to me is even beginner stuff in Axure. So let me show you what we can do. Let's say when someone picks Tuesday, we want to go back to the styles page. Now, notice that the drop list is already different in Axure, and this is just Axure's default drop list. This isn't one you built. You didn't have to build a separate overlay and say, when someone clicks here, show them this overlay, and then this overlay does different things. This is just a drop list that knows it's a drop list. So I can say there's an interaction here. The interaction could be, what if the selection changes? Okay, what should I do? Well, so the selection changes means someone pulls this down and they pick something different than what they've already picked. Well, maybe I want to say open link styles. Now there's something missing from here, but I've done this on purpose. So what that means is I've told Axure if somebody opens up this drop list and they've changed it to anything, go to the styles page. Okay, that worked. We're on the styles page. But what if I only want that to happen if they pick Tuesday? Because I want something different to happen when they pick Monday. And again, Axure has so many things that you can make happen. It goes way, way beyond linking. People who are used to using Figma are used to the idea that, oh, when people interact with this, we've got to move to another screen or overlay something. With Axure, if we go back here, let's open up our editor. There are so many things that you can do. Open a link, close a window, scroll to, which means moving down a page to a certain point, showing or hiding something, setting a panel state. Dynamic panels are beginner stuff in Axure, but we may or may not get to too much of it today. Setting an image, making something checked or unchecked. Selected list option is what we've got now. We have a drop list. Set an error state. Make something look like it's in an error state because we're giving people an error message. Enable, disable, you just saw me do that. Move something, rotate something, change something's size, move something to the front or back, change its opacity. Focus is awesome for people who are working with form fields. Those of you familiar with form fields know that focus means put the cursor in a particular field. So you could put the cursor on any field on that page because you're telling Axure to put the focus there. Chantel says, can these interactions like the drop down be styled to match your brand? Yes and no. The default drop-down that I showed you just now can't, but I do have a lesson where I show you how you can build a drop-down from scratch. Basically, you build it from rectangles. And because they're rectangles, you can apply whatever styles you like to them. There's a whole bunch of repeater stuff, which we'll play with a little bit today, but repeaters are quite advanced. So this is everything Axure can do every time you want it to take action. That's where the word Axure comes from. So it is not French. It is people think like it's from some other language. I believe it is from action. And so right now, we're just making things link to other things, but we can make and before we did enable, disable, but there's all kinds of things that you can make happen in Axure. So let's get more specific. We said when the selection changes, open link, which means go to another page in our file, the styles page. All right, but what if I want that to happen only under a certain condition? This is where I need what Axure calls a case. So I'll say if Tuesday, just to remind myself, this is a name, this doesn't do anything, it's just a name to remind myself this is the Tuesday condition. So if the selected option of this equals Tuesday, that's it. We've written conditional logic. We've taught Axure that opening the link styles should only happen if, when people pull down this drop list, they pick Tuesday. Now again, we can do all these same things even with the custom-made one that I teach you about in the lessons where you can add all of the brand styling. For now, I'm showing you a little bit of the Axure function without the styling. So now we can see clearly here in our interactions pane, if the selected option of this, what's this? This is the thing we're working on right now, which is the drop list. If the selected option of this is Tuesday, go to styles. I can do a quick copy paste, and I can change this, and I could say, what if it's Wednesday? Well, if someone picks Wednesday, that's the condition. Now I need to tell it what to do. I want to open a link to outside link. Let's go to something more fun. Patreon, but I can't spell today. Oh my gosh, patreon.com/cxcc in the new tab. Okay, just to mix it up a little bit. So to remind ourselves, for this drop list, we've built two actions, or you might think of them as triggers or events. If someone picks Tuesday, go to the styles page. If someone picks Wednesday, go to Deb's Patreon. Let's give it a try. Save. Refresh. Let's start with Tuesday. Boom, we're on the styles page. If you're not sure, look over here on the left. It's a styles page, everybody. Now let's go back to this page, and now we'll pick Wednesday. And okay, so what should happen? New tab should open up, and we go to my Patreon. Wednesday. Boom. So again, disregard right now that, oh, this is my real Patreon, so you're all seeing who I follow. Womp womp. Close window. So as you can see, this drop list isn't the prettiest thing in town. It would take a separate lesson for us to pretty this up and make it match our design system or brand guidelines. But you can see that the functionality is quickly more advanced than Figma and wasn't even that hard to build. It didn't take us minutes or hours or days to learn this or do this. So for people who think like, oh my gosh, the Axure learning curve is so big, it's not that big. And not only did you just build interesting interactions, but you just used conditional logic. And that wasn't so hard. Obviously, Axure conditional logic can get very complicated. But in this case, it was, hey, Axure, what did people pick from this list? If it's this, do this. As soon as you're thinking, if this happens, you need a condition. Or when this, happens, you need a condition. And Axure has lots and lots of conditions available. We just use the one for the drop list. Now let's talk about Axure's default UI components, not components. We are playing with a drop list right now. Do they have a drop list here? Form patterns. Is it here? Drop list. Where did I see it? Predictive search is neat. So Axure has these default elements. They're free. They come with Axure. And they do lots of stuff. The upside is they do lots of stuff. The downside is if you haven't gone through my lessons, you won't know how to customize them. So you'll pull it out and you'll go, this is amazing. And then you'll go, I don't know how to make this work for what I'm doing. I'm not sure how to put my brand on it, and I'm not sure how to adjust the content. So remember that even though Axure has some great predefined elements, these patterns. They're ready out of the box, but you might not know how to customize them or use them without learning Axure more. So that some of that learning curve is still there. I don't see, there was supposed to be a drop list here. Am I missing it? Text field, search input, input stepper, checkbox group, slider, chips, accordion. I could swear I saw it. I don't know where it went. Tab, slideshow, carousel. Heh. Oh well. But, so let me just show you quickly. Let's grab something else. Predictive search. Sounds cool, right? Wow, what's all of that? Jeepers. I don't even know. Now, if we try it out, see it says here, try typing new. Okay, new. Oh my gosh. So it's a realistic, completely realistic search. I could write anything. I could write small. I could write medium. I could write release. Now, you might say, ooh, I want to change the blue. I want to move the magnifying glass. I want to change this field hint. I want to change the content in there. You can, but you would have to have a certain level of knowledge of Axure to be able to do that. Because some of these things are grouped, you'd need to understand the grouping or ungroup them. Some of this stuff is in this hidden piece. This is a repeater. Here's where your data is. And that's when people start go, oh no. I have a 3-hour lesson on YouTube about repeaters. You will be comfortable with repeaters after just a few hours. So is there a learning curve? Sure, but there was for Figma too. When I first started in Figma, I didn't really understand what a component was yet. I didn't understand auto layout. I didn't understand variants. I had to figure these out or watch a tutorial and get there. So if you have to watch Axure tutorials, it's not the end of the world. Many of my tutorials are under 20 minutes long. Repeaters is super complex, and I walk you through a project that we do together. So repeaters I teach over the course of a 3-hour video. So that is a bit of an investment, but repeaters are great to know about because you just saw a realistic search. So if you wanted to build that into your prototype, you'd be able to do that. It wouldn't be a fake search. You could build in real stuff and you could have it really search. So what does that look like? So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of interactions happening in the background. You don't necessarily have to be able to write them. This came pre-made, but you'd have to know some things about Axure if you want to change this layout, change these colors, change what people can search through so it's not just all new release, change what some of these things look like. So again, it's great that Axure gives you these pieces, but these pieces only go so far if you don't know enough about Axure to customize them. I hope that made sense. But my main point for this lesson was then when it comes to making the types of click-throughs that you're used to with Figma, it's really easy in Axure. And that in many cases, the things you're used to being a click, a kind of a click trigger type of thing, like a drop list, doesn't work that way in Axure necessarily. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, please do check them out, dcx.link/Axure. That will send you to my playlist on the dcx YouTube channel with all of my Axure videos. So we're almost an hour in, so I'm going to jump to another lesson, and that is components. Quick tip from me. Don't use Axure components for things like common buttons and elements that will often do different things or look different. Just use global styling. If you always want your button to be green and this font size and these rounded corners, you don't need a component for it. Figma probably works better with a component. Axure, Not so much. Better to use the global styling. So let's take a look at Axure components. So Axure components are when you have something, either an individual element or a group of things, could be an entire interactive piece, could be the whole top header of your website. When you have something you're going to use over and over again on multiple pages or screens of your prototype, you probably want a component because it's just like we had global styles, a component is a global, say, element with one or more widgets in it that you can globally control, where you change it once and it changes everywhere. Let's make one. Let's start with something simple. Let's say that we are creating some icons around our prototype, but we know that these might not be the finalized icons. We know someone's probably going to change their mind later, and these are going to be placeholder icons. We want to easily swap out these icons later without wanting to jump out the window because someone needed us to change a zillion icons. So just for fun, let's just grab a sample icon. Okay, first one I saw, address book. Here we go. Oh, there we go. And let's say it's 30 pixels high. Okay, there we go. So that is, over in components, we have a component called icon. And again, a component is global for your Axure file. It's not your team, it's not your company, it's just this file. So if I go to the components page and I say, oh, I'm going to need this icon here, and I'm going to need this icon here, and I'm going to need one over here. And they could be on other pages as well. I could go back to click-through model and I could say, you need an icon over here. There you go. Now you might notice it's a little pinkish. We didn't make it pink. Why is it pink? Axure calls these masks, and you can turn it off if you want, but to me, I like them. Oh yeah, mask dynamic panels too. I love masks. So the mask tells me this is a certain type of Axure widget. This is a component. I'll also know that when I click on it, because over here on the right it says component, but without clicking on it, the pink masking says, I am a component. So I've got my components all over my file. Now let's say someone comes back to us and says, oh, hey, we just learned this is not going to be the icon, so get a different icon. And so, I don't know, let's get these arrows. We'll drop them at 0, 0, and we want them to be 30 high, and let's say someone decided they're blue. Again, I can manually color them, or I could use our good buddy, the global styles. So I gave it the button style just to make it the same blue as the button, but you could make your own styles. Now, everywhere that component was dropped, it still has the pink mask giving us a clue that it's a component, but now it's got a blue, whatever that is, arrows on it. Now let's use an example with words, and let's talk about why I don't love when people use a component for a button, though you could. Let's say we do a component and we call it primary button. And let's say we go to our library and we drag out our primary button. Oop, I've gone too far. 0, 0. There we go. Well, first of all, that didn't really need to be a component. That's kind of ready to go. But let's say you like your button to be a certain size, and so that's what you want. So it's going to be 200 wide by 50 high. That's our default button. The end. And that way, if we had a page, we could say, okay, we're going to need a button here. So why is this difficult and not recommended? First of all, how do you change the text on this? Now, Axure does have a component text override, but it's not like Figma where you just start clicking on it and you can type anything you want. If I start clicking on this, Axure thinks I want to go back and edit the component. So if I go back here, I can override the text over here. But it's not easy to change what this button does, because you might have some instances of this button where it goes to another page. You might have some instances of this button where an overlay comes up. How do you do that? Remember our interaction. Remember, whenever we have a widget, we have this interaction button where we can start building an interaction. When I'm on a component, that's not here. Now, there is a way to do it. It's kind of advanced, but it's not easy. And so ultimately, it's probably just easier for you to use your global styles for something like a button versus a component. Because if you change the color of this, you'd use your global styles to change that everywhere. If you change the size of your button, if you think the size of a button's going to change everywhere, okay, component makes more sense because this is the exact button. If somebody came back later and said, look, everywhere we've put this button, we need it to be smaller. We want this button to be 180 by 45. Okay, now this button is 180 by 45, right? Says should be. So that's some of the difference. But again, the difference is that with Axure, if in a Figma component, you would be able to start linking up lots of stuff. In an Axure component, you can do it, but it's more of an advanced feature. It uses something called raised event, which you've heard Dr. Nick mention on our show. So it can be done. It's just a little bit more of an advanced technique. So I don't want you to think that it can't be done. It can. It's just more of an advanced technique. I'll build that technique super quickly, but you'll probably want to see my videos for the long version. So on click, raise event, build a raised event, click, okay, boom. Now let's go back to the component. This is my component. Make a new interaction, click interaction, open link. Okay, we're halfway done. To the styles page. Okay. So, was that difficult? No. Was that time consuming? No. Do most of you have no idea what I just did? Yes. Most of you have no idea what I just did because you haven't learned raised event. But once you know raised event, that went super fast and that wasn't so hard. So, what's the learning curve there? Understanding raised event. But once I knew what a raised event was, doing that was really fast. And it'll absolutely work. So I can say refresh. And let's find our components page. Submit. Oh, it's being grumpy. Primary button raise event. Okay, so why didn't it do it? Oh, I'm having a grumpy day. Wah, wah. Well, it should work. I would probably be writing to tech support right now to see why that didn't work, but that should work. The raised event should create a clickable interaction, and then you teach it what it does for that particular button. But again, not particularly glamorous. I've been using Axure since early 2011. I rarely used raise event. And you might be like, yeah, Deb, you just messed it up. I might have messed it up, but that really should have worked. So I wonder what I messed up. But I don't use raised event very much. I mostly use components for reusable pieces that might change later, where I'm really going to be grateful that they are in some sort of global thing that is easy to change. So what do I use them for the most? Website or app headers, website or app footers, because typically those look the same on every page. They work the same on every page, and you don't want to have to copy and paste them in different places. You don't want to have to rebuild them. You want to just make a component out of them and drag that component out and use it. So that was a little bit about components, albeit a slightly imperfect lesson, but that's what I get by not having used raised events in a while, but it should work. Raised, now I'm all confused. That should have worked. Now I'm all mad. Primary button, raise event. Ah, ooh. Oh, I did it. That was it. Okay, I'm feeling positive. I'm feeling positive. Yeah! I didn't check a little box. Okay, learning curve, small. What the hell did I just do? You don't know. So it feels like, oh my god, how am I ever going to know that? But once you learn raised events, it will make sense. Hooray! That worked. That means, hypothetically, I could drag out another primary button, though obviously in real life you would only have so many primary buttons on a page. Do not do this. Other thing. So this button will say other thing, and I can make this button do something different. Click. What should it do? I don't know. What do you want to make it do? Let's make it move something just for fun. Let's make it move this shape, and it'll move 300 pixels to the right with a linear slide. Just for fun. I'm feeling fun. Let's try it. Refresh. Components. Click other thing. Zoop. Boo. Okay, so what do I have going on here on the right? What is this? The people using your prototype don't have to see this. You can publish your prototype in a way where people don't see some of the behind the scenes sausage, but this is essentially a little debugging window. This shows me what is Axure doing when something happens so I can troubleshoot my own stuff. So it showed me, aha, click. What happened? We did the primary button raise click, and then the click made the shape move. So this is just a little kind of debugger if you want to think of it that way. But again, I can take this off of the screen, and so when I publish this prototype to people, they don't see all of the Axure tools. You can make it available to people to expand if you wanted to see, like your coworkers. But if you're sending it out for like usability testing, you can completely make that unavailable. Any questions about Axure as we're going? These have been great questions so far from Paul and Chantel. So let me know if you have any questions about what can it do, what can't it do, the learning curve to do things. Otherwise, I will move on to another lesson. Because I want to talk a little bit about auto layout. Many people love auto layout in Figma. You have some sort of component or set of things, and then you kind of tell the system you need a bunch of those. Maybe you need a bunch of those going to the right, or a bunch of those going down, or a bunch of them forming a grid, and it takes the same kind of layout and design and kind of repeats it. So we're going to do a mini lesson on Axure repeaters, and I'm going to build it here with and for you because this page is blank. So I'm starting from nothing. Now, by default, Axure gives you two types of repeaters, but really a repeater is a repeater. It doesn't matter whether you pick repeater table or repeater card. A repeater is Axure's kind of version of auto layout in that you're saying, look, I have a set of data. My data has words, my data has images, my data has interactability, and it always lays out a certain way, and I want you to repeat that layout. Sound familiar? So let's take a look at the way Axure does this with both repeater table and repeater card. Though honestly, repeater card is new. You used to only get repeater table and you would have to build it into a card. So it's got that flexibility. Let's drag out repeater table. And you can see I've got a data table. First name, last name, score. Okay, let's add another one. We had Paul here, and let's say he scored very well. He got a 70. Now notice as I was typing that, it made another data row. And I could add another one. We've got Charlene here, or at least we used to. And let's say Charlene did even better. She got an 80. Now we have this data table in the form of a repeater. We do have some styling options here. So for example, do I want the data to go vertically or horizontally? That's horizontal. So in this case, we definitely want vertical data if you're making a data table. Do we want to create some spacing between the rows? Yeah, give me 20. Is there a reason to wrap this? No, that doesn't really make sense. Wrapping doesn't work here. Do we want alternating background colors? Sometimes we do for a data table. And just to make sure it stands out at everybody, let's do alternating white and yellow. And pagination would be great if you have lots of pages of data that you want to mess with. Let's do a little refresh here and see how my repeater is coming along. Okay. Not getting the alternating background colors that I was expecting. And let's double click. So when I double click, what do I have? What is this? This is the model. We're telling Axure how we want this to lay out. And there's invisible boxes here, which is weird. You have to get used to the way Axure did this. It was different in the old days. This is an invisible rectangle. And this rectangle is, as you can see here, let's give these names. This rectangle is going to be the first name. See, so you can see over here, it's rectangle first name. When I mouse over here, notice when I mouse over this rectangle, it's highlighting an invisible rectangle that we now see here. And then the score is really over here. So it's just 3 boxes. These aren't form fields. You can't type in them. We could add that. You know, let's say you want to make some notes about each student. All right. Here we go. And let's make this a little narrower. And let's say that's, and there's a background color and a line on here. I'm going to just grab these and take that off for a moment because they aren't global styled, so they're making me a little wacky. So style, fill, get this out of here just for now. Okay. All right, this is my new model. It's got this line underneath, but let's take that off also. Border 0. Okay, obviously that makes it even harder to see where some of our pieces are, but let's see what our repeater looks like now. All right, we're getting there. There's still a weird gray box here that we've got to figure out, but we'll get there. So we could say, needs improvement. Yikes. Good job. Now, I don't have anything in place to save this text, but Axure can save this text. So that, of course, would be a more intermediate thing, a little bit of a learning curve, but you could actually have it save this text. So that is a fun, cool thing. Let's see. So looking back at our repeater, and it looks like we still have something here that's causing some sort of gray line. Isolate. Oop. Give me an isolate for a moment. Not sure why that's there, but we'll ignore it for now. Could always write to support and go, why is there a gray thing here? Okay. So that's an example of something that's using an auto layout. Let's switch to, let's move this out of the way and zoom out a little bit. And let's take a look at what it looks like when you drag out repeater card. Again, same functionality. Axure's just giving you a different model by default. By default, they've given you a model that has a little picture, a heading, and some text. And I can go in here and just type here in the data and say, this is what I want here. Seaside, trees, and water. So you can see as I change the data, it flows that into the repeater. So it looks like because I changed the font size, the font here is a little funky. It's not fitting into the boxes. Let's go in and clean up our model. This is our model. So our model is an image placeholder, which Axure understands to dump in this image. It's this text, and Axure understands that goes with this column of text. And then there's this text that goes with this. So what I could do is I could make this card bigger. I could put a shadow on it. Let's put a cheesy shadow on it. Let's see, shadow, enable. There we go. Cheesy shadow just for fun. And let's make this box bigger just for fun. And refresh. Okay, so this is super ugly and obviously still needs some better design. We can also control. Let's go back to our settings. And we can, so again, do you want it vertical or horizontal? And do you want it to be a grid? So when you have a grid, it says, how many do you want? Well, what if I want 2? So now that puts 2 columns, and then it starts wrapping. I can also adjust the spacing here, row spacing, column spacing. And when I add more lines of data here, which is just this little plus, it's going to add more of these. So I'm not doing copy paste. That you can do it. You can always design one of these boxes and copy paste to your heart's content. You can use lots of global styling. We can use global styling here in the repeater. Or again, the idea of a repeater is that you have one particular model. So everything is going to lay out like this. The picture will be this size, and we've got a box around it, and we have a cheesy shadow, and this is the heading, and this is the body, and anything we change here. So for example, let's change this typography to dark blue. And let's change the body to, and I'm just picking ugly colors just to show you that whatever I change in the repeater model flows into the data that we've put down here. Now notice it says import CSV. You can import or paste a CSV or data from a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet. So if you happen to have a table of data that you need to manipulate or represent realistically in a prototype, Axure is going to be your choice as well. In fact, behind the scenes, the repeater is how Axure did that searchable text box, because you have data in here, and you can write some stuff in Axure that says, can you find which rows have the data I'm looking for? Is this making some sense to people watching live? Anybody have some questions about how this works, or something you're trying to do or imagine in your Axure dreams? So is it perfect auto layout? It's not identical to Figma, but you can see how if you're trying to work with some tables of data, it could be really useful. And one nice thing is because it is treated as data, we can do things like sorting and filtering in a realistic way. Primary button, let's just make a button. Even though you probably wouldn't use a button for what I'm about to do, let's just draw, we'll use a button anyway, so that it can be really nice and obvious for all of you watching at home or at work. Let's say I want this button to take this repeater and sort everybody by their scores, low to high. Interactions. First, let's make sure this repeater has a name. It says table repeater, and this one doesn't have a name. So fine, we just want to make sure we sort the table repeater. So on the button, new interaction. When people click on the button, what do I want to happen? Add a sort. Which repeater? The table repeater. Which column? The score. How do you want to sort it? It's numbers. How do you want it to go? Ascending, and if I have any other sorts, remove them. Okay, was that a big learning curve? Nah, it's a little learning curve. You've never seen that before. You didn't know you could do it. It takes a little getting used to. Is that a giant learning curve? No. Was that scary? Not really. So let's take a look. Refresh. Oh my God, Figma can't do this stuff. Yeah. So now when I click this button, and again, we can watch our little debugger over here, which Axure calls, they keep changing the name of this thing. Oh yeah, the interaction console. So when I click the button, boom, Axure says, hey, I went to your table repeater and I added a sort, and I've sorted it by score. So that was what would you have to do in Figma? You'd have to make a bunch of artboards or overlays that pretended to resort the data, boop, bop, boop, beep. So I don't have to do that in Axure. So we could say this is sort score. And just for fun, let's do a copy paste. Let's do a sort name. And I'm going to come in here. Now, when we copy paste, we also get the interaction we built. So I just have to say, hey, give me alphanumeric or alphabetical sort, not on the score column. Let's do a first name sort. Go. Save. Refresh. Okay, so now that means Bob should be first, Vanessa should be last, sort by name. Boom. Sort by score. Boom. So if you needed someone to do a realistic manipulation of information, Axure's got you pretty covered there. Is this the prettiest thing in the world? Nah, my yellow is ridiculous. I don't know why those gray bars are there. I'd need to troubleshoot this a little bit more, but part of my reason for doing this was I didn't know prep ahead of time, so that even if I mess up, you can watch me try to deal with it. So, again, learning curve, is that big? No. Will it take time for you to get comfortable with it? Sure, but that wasn't that bad. And by the way, we can also do the filter, and the filter was how Axure did that fake search. So let's imagine, let's do another one. Let's do filter name. And what I'm going to do is completely remove the interaction. Let's build a fresh one. I want to add a filter in the table repeater. I want to oh, hold on. Let me erase this for a moment. Let's start again. Let's open up my big editor. I sometimes think better here. On click. Add action. Add a filter to the table repeater. We need a place to type something for the filter because we need to make a rule. Aha! That's right. I knew I was missing a piece. All right. Before we filter, let's grab an area where people can write something and we can filter by what they've written. Here we go. Little text box. We'll call this filter input. And now let's try writing that again. New interaction. When people click, add a filter on the table repeater. Sure, let's go by first names. First name contains the text on widget filter input. Let's see if that works. Let's see. Which names have the letter B? Filter. Bob. Which names have a letter V? Vanessa. Okay. Which names have everything? I didn't make a clear button. I'd have to make a clear button to remove the filters. Fine. Which names have the letter A? 3 of them, and sort them by name. Ah, sorting filtered stuff. Ooh. And of course, I could do this in a little bit more exciting way because we know that a predictive search doesn't require you to click a button. Right now, I'm clicking a button, and some of you are probably thinking like, gosh, that seems old-fashioned to start typing in a field and you have to click a button to see if these things come up. No, I want to do it as I'm typing. Okay, fine. You talked me into it. Okay, let's do that. On text change, do a thing. Okay, save, refresh, A, N, just A, nothing. How long did that take me? Seconds. How long will it take you? A little longer. You're still learning. How hard was that? Not that hard. Not that hard. Do we agree? So that's pretty neat. I didn't know you could do that in Axure. Yeah, it's actually been around since 2013. But again, when people are afraid of Axure or they haven't taken my courses, there's a lot of stuff that you don't know that you can do. So the realistic data filtering is fun, and it's also how you can make a sort of fake or realistic predictive search. Hey, I want to find everybody named Vanessa, V-A. Oh, look, there they are. Let's say you have 2 Vanessas. Let's go back into our data. Let's make another Vanessa. We've got Vanessa Jones, who scored a 57. All right. Groovy. Refresh. Cool. I want to find everybody named Vanessa. V-A. Great. Super realistic. Now, I only have it checking the first name. So if you start typing Jones, I can't help you here. But again, we could build this out further if we wanted to. These are just examples. And again, when we're prototyping, who are we prototyping for? We're prototyping for ourselves, for our own design process. We're prototyping for our cross-functional team so that we can show them what we're working on and see if we missed anything, get some feedback. We're prototyping for engineers so we can say, look, this is how it's going to work. People are going to be able to type in here and narrow down this list and sort it and filter it. We're prototyping for usability testing. And this is, of course, where Axure stomps all over Figma, because in Figma, if you can't type into spaces and use things realistically, then what do you have? You're just testing that people can go from step 1 to step 2, but it might not be the way people wanted to use it. And if you don't, like, I can build this so that anything can happen. I can say, you want to choose one of these teammates so that you can see more information about their record. Go ahead, pick one. Oh, I think I'd like to see Paul. Okay, Paul. I don't have to say to people, only Vanessa works. Please type Vanessa. Well, that usability testing is flawed. I told people what to do. So by building out some of these intermediate and advanced Axure features, your usability testing is going to be less flawed, more valid, because when I ask people to use a thing, they can use a thing. Let's open up a thing. Let's open up. Let's see if it's in my recent files list, since sometimes I open it. If not, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll dig it up. Is it this one? No, it's not this one. All right, let me stop sharing my screen just for a moment so I can find you a thing. And I show this in other places. It's one of the most complex Axure files I've ever built, though I have seen people build more complex files. But I want to show people what a very complex Axure file would look like, because this is, one of the higher ends of, oh my gosh, we have to make something super advanced. Let's see, is this it? No. Oh, that's right. I might not be able to open it. Give me a second to open some windows here. Axure Cloud. Oh boy. All right, let's go into the Axure cloud. No, Axure. So Axure Cloud is like their portal where you can host your prototypes. And okay, here's the sign-in button is not where I expected, but you know, maybe they'll hire me and I can fix that. Let's try this. Okay, I'm going to try to pull up one of my most complicated prototypes and then we'll talk about it a little. Give me a moment. Oops, sorry, I wasn't prepared for this. Should have been prepared. All right, let's see if it's this one. All right, let's go back to screen sharing. Merge. All right, so here's this, and we'll want to get the chat room up, otherwise I'll never see what people are saying. So... and I don't know where... okay, here we go. All right, so this was one that we've made that you've heard me talk about before. And this was, what if people wanted to, oh, I don't know if this is the one that works. Let's check. No, this is the other version. Give me a second. Should be 3.2. Yeah, there we go. All right. So let's imagine we have a website where you can buy lots of customized mugs. And let's say you want a certain number of them. I need 300 mugs. So notice the tier that's now selected is the correct tier for 300. And down here, we're doing the math. Yeah, Axure does math. We have $339 of mugs because they're $1.13 each, setup charges, printing charges, free shipping, and sales tax. They'll say, hey, that's not a bad price. What if we did 2-color mugs? You know, maybe we'll do a 2-color logo. Well, the imprint charges just changed, which meant more sales tax on that pup. Now, what if this is not going back in time. Let's pretend this is tomorrow is June 1. Let's say I need some faster shipping, June 15. Notice now, the rush production and shipping charges were added. Sales tax changes, grand total changes. Maybe we go, that's a little more than I wanted to spend. Maybe I'll just get 200 mugs. 200. Okay, the tier changes. The math changes. Yes, Axure is actually doing live math. This is Axure. This is very realistic. We took this to very realistic usability testing, but here's where it gets fun. We told people, what if you had $1,000? How many mugs could you get? Oh, okay. 1,000 mugs. Oh, I can get 329 mugs. That's not bad. What if I wanted to try full color logo? The dcx logo is very complicated. All right, I can get about 267. I'm just over my budget a little bit, but that's close. Notice how interesting that is and how realistic that is. If you wanted to do some very realistic e-commerce, it would be very hard to do that in Figma. You could make this drop down. You could try to make it look like somebody selected one of these things, but it would be very hard to then reverse engineer how much budget they have, what different things on the screen are costing them, like print locations, shipping prices, and other things, and tell them how many they can get. Let's go back to free shipping. How many mugs can I get now? Ooh, over 600. Okay, the math is imperfect. I could probably get more than 601. I've got room in my budget. But you can see that this is realistic enough. No developers were involved, completely no code. This is all Axure, but there's a lot of complex instructions in the background. There's complex conditional logic and other stuff that I've put in here. How long did this take me? Some hours, half a day. So did this take me weeks, months? No. This was maybe half a day of work because it is extremely complex. I don't even think I can show you how complex it is. This particular version doesn't show you the behind the scenes of it. But I hope that's giving people some ideas of how far you can go with Axure if you want to learn that the more advanced stuff. But if you think about it, for most of the designing and prototyping that many of you will do, you don't need to do this. You don't need to go this far with your Axuring. It's probably fine to do a lot of the things we've done together today, to use the repeaters to make some of these kind of auto layout elements, to build simple forms where we can actually collect data from people and save that data if we wanted to. Sorry, here we go. Got to open my file again. Oh, there we go. File. Here we go. There we go. Happy. Refresh. So a lot of it is going to be, because to me, Figma is really just a click-through wireframe. You're mostly wireframing the things that people think are interactive in Figma, like making a drop list. Like, to me, that's like the bottom, that's the base, you know. Oh, a drop list? Okay, but what about checkboxes that are real? Remember, we did a checkbox here where checking this box enabled or disabled a field, allowing us to realistically actually type into it. That was good to see. Half a day isn't too bad. No, half a day isn't bad because we wanted to take it to realistic usability testing. If I were just designing it for myself or my coworkers or engineering, I could always say, hey, pretend when people put in the budget that the math gets done and we reverse engineer how many mugs they can afford. I could just tell people that or put it in the documentation or the notes. But because we wanted to usability test it and we wanted it to be realistic, it was important to spend a few hours building that out so that we could see if did it make sense to people? Did it work the way they expected? You know, the usual things, usable, desirable, etc. And probably accessibility friendly. You could tab your way over to that field, write a budget in there, boom, tab all over the place. Axure does allow for tabbing, and you can control tab order. That would be your focus. But again, all of these are lessons over on the YouTube channel. So I don't want to keep y'all forever. Are there any other questions that you have, especially thinking about Figma? You know, hey, I'm used to Figma doing this. Can Axure do this? Or how would Axure do this thing I can't do in Figma that I wish I could do in Figma? Because from what I can see, at least from Figma's announcements here in summer 2024, they sound like they're going more towards AI and having AI design for you and having AI design for product managers versus more realistic prototyping. If they're working on more realistic prototyping, they definitely didn't announce that, so that would be news to me. But there you go. Chantel says, I think that helps as we want to try to do more usability testing without having to rely on dev and QA. And that's a great point. In the olden days before people were using things like Axure, you had to find a UX person who could code, right? How many jobs do we see where it says, it would be great if you knew HTML and CSS and JavaScript so you can prototype your designs. I don't have to prototype my designs. I can make this stuff in Axure, and I can even make extremely complex things in just hours or sometimes faster because I'm more of an expert. You're going to be newer. These things will take you longer, but they can be done. They're not impossible. There's always many ways to get things done in Axure, plenty of workarounds, plenty of weird things that you would think don't work but do. Yeah, so really great. To me, the number one reason to use Axure is good usability testing, because Figma is just not going to allow you that realistic stuff. Axure even has realistic mobile stuff where it's got swiping, it's got dragging and dropping, which you can use in mobile or on web. Okay, not accessible, but sometimes you have something that drags and drops. So there's all these highly realistic things that Axure can do. So number one, usability testing. Number two, communication with developers and teammates. Instead of saying to a developer, okay, imagine when people click here, it's going to do this. Or imagine if they touch this icon, they could drag this here. They don't have to imagine. They can just do it. Pepe Jeans, hashtag not sponsored, says, how does Axure pricing work? If we use Figma for UI stuff and we want to do prototypes in Axure, would we need a license per designer or per developer to access to? Great question. So the way that Axure licensing works, at least as of summer 2024, is only people working on Axure prototypes need a license. So let's say I'm on a team with Chantel. Chantel and I both get licenses. We could get pro licenses, which are the lower level license, or we could get team licenses, which cost more, which allow us to work on the same file at the same time, even though Axure 10 is not in the cloud. They use kind of a repository beanstalky type of approach. So you could go pro or team, up to you. But if you're just showing your prototype to other people, so say you're showing it to your product manager, you're showing it to a stakeholder, you're showing it to a usability testing person, they don't need licenses. Only someone who's going into an Axure prototype to build it or edit it in some way needs that license. So for the most part, you really tend to just give your licenses to designers. I do know a few companies that have given licenses to other people who go into Axure prototypes for other reasons, like a content strategist who might go in and update some text. Some people gave them to a business analyst because they updated the text because they didn't have content strategists. So the licenses are ultimately for the people who are creating or editing a prototype. If you are viewing a published prototype, you do not need a license. So does Axure do smart animate and transitions? Sure, let's talk about animations and transitions. So Axure's animations and transitions are still on the minimal side, but they do exist. So let's take this. So you saw move. So Axure has, let's go in and show you a couple of things. So you've seen move, which is going to be X and Y at the same time. There's rotate. So there's that animation, but let's say we want to show or hide something with a transition. In fact, let me build something really quickly for a moment. Let's imagine we have a side panel that slides out. So just for fun, I'm just going to make this box. The box is ugly, and this is the extremely short version of this, and I'm going to say this is our side panel, and by default it's hidden. And when I click this blue button, the side panel slides out. So when I click show the side panel, show it. Now here's your animations. So animations in Axure are still fairly limited. You've got fade in, fade out, and then you have slide up, down, left, right, and you've got flip, which pretty much nobody uses. So this would be a slide left. You can say how fast or slow you want that to go. So 500 milliseconds would be it takes half a second for it to slide out. Let's do a full second. And you can also you can add these things as well if you'd like. In this case, for a slide, it's already kind of a linear motion. You don't need these other things. So I can go back here, refresh, go to the styles page. Let's get rid of this and watch that slide in. Now, it wasn't exactly from the side, because we have a little bit of a margin here just because of the size of our screen, I could do a couple of things that would make that absolutely locked to the side. You do have pinning stuff to the screen, so like if you always have a chat widget on the bottom right, you can lock it there. If this really locked to the side of the screen, even when people scrolled, you can do that as well. So there are some animations and transitions in Axure, but they are still on the minimal side. I would expect to see more in Axure 11, which they're working on, but to me, I don't usually usability test for an animation. You know, an animation is a nice touch. It can sometimes make something worse. It sometimes can make something better, but I'm usually not usability testing the animation. So you just want to make sure that the animation is not getting in people's way. And Chantel, what kinds of animations were you hoping to do? And maybe I can tell you if Axure can do it. Because again, we do have fade, we do have slide, we have move and rotate. We can pin things to the very side, which I didn't do here. So this one had a little bit of a margin, but you can pin it all the way to top, bottom, left, right kind of thing, or a corner. But yeah, Axure's not heavy on the animations or the micro animations. There are other tools that do that better. But again, for my purposes, for many years, having just the simple animation of something fade in, fade out, or slide in, slide out. You can also, for example, I could say, hey, when this thing slides out, it's kind of an overlay. It looks like a light box. Everything else on the page should be kind of screened out. Okay, go. Refresh. So again, there's lots of variations here that I teach in my video courses that are a little tough to go into now without, missing some of the detail. But Chantel, tell me more about the types of animations you would like to do, and I can tell you if Axure can do that or even try to whip up one quickly. So when I think about the things I've done in my career, fade, slide, and move covered just about everything. And I only had to do rotate once. No, you know what I do rotate for? If I want to make a spinner. And then I could take a thing. We used to have to paste in an animated GIF or GIF. And now you can just put in a thing and you can go, rotate that. Rotate that for a while and then stop. And that is my spinner. That is my discount spinner. Just waiting for Chantel to reply, or anybody else. If there's an animation you're thinking of or curious about in Axure, let me know. But again, I think some of the weird things for people who started in Figma and never used Axure or some of the earlier things are going to be like, whoa, where's all my artboards? You don't really have artboards. Axure added negative space to, at one point, I think it was Axure 9, and I said, I don't need negative space. I don't need to put something at negative 100. I think they were trying to appeal to people who used artboards, but it never made sense to me to do that. Once in a while, I'll put something off the Axure board if it's going to animate in later, but in general, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't see a response from Chantel about what animation she was hoping to do, so I don't know what to speak to there. But there are some animations, and you can combine fading and sliding and bounce and elastic, and you can combine some of those and turn it into something. Okay. Any other questions? Again, I highly recommend my Axure course, available free on YouTube. Go to dcx.link/, Axure. Ooh, Pepe Jean says, if there are no artboards, how do you design for mobile? So my technique for designing for mobile, which I don't think I put up a video about, because I might have to make all new lessons when Axure 11 comes out, is actually to use dynamic panel states. And I know you're thinking, what? What were those words? Yeah, Axure has something called dynamic panels, and dynamic panels have states, and that's how I design for mobile. I know that's very vague and confusing. Let's see if I can do something quickly in that. Mobile. Those are fine. It was more sliding things we work on app. Yeah, I use a lot of sliding and a lot of fades, and that's really been pretty much all I've needed in my career. I once did like an exploding fab, where you clicked on something and a whole bunch of, they used to be popular on Android. Like you'd click on a fab floating action button and a bunch of things would come out of it in this little circle or semicircle. And I just had to tell Axure, okay, when someone clicks on this, this thing animates from here to here. This thing animates from here to here. This thing animates from here to here. And then you had this like, exploding semicircle effect. So mobile, I would make a dynamic panel. Let's go with 0, 0. Let's pretend it's 480 by 1500 just for kicks. So that's too tall. No phone looks like that. Let's say 480 by 800, just as a thing, just as a rectangle. Let's say this is the viewable area of your phone. And everything is going to live inside of here. So now I've got to start putting content in here. So Axure does a dynamic panel, and every state is content that can be inside of this rectangle. So let's say in state 1, I can put some paragraphs. All right, so, and let's move this down a little bit just so you can see that there's a peak, or we're implying that there's more there. And I can now go back to this dynamic panel, and I can say, oh, where did they move it? Dynamic panel. Scroll. Scroll as needed, but that's got scroll bars. Yeah, so I'd probably have to build my manual viewporty thing for that. But the idea is that you could then build a whole bunch of screens that take place inside of this viewport in a sense. So I could say maybe state number 2 has a giant image on it and a button. And let's go back to state 1. And let's say state 1 has a button on it. And I could say, okay, when someone clicks the button, show them state 2 of the panel. So again, a panel is a viewable area. It's got some special features that we're not going to have time to go into, but the idea is that you have a fixed area, just like my phone has a fixed area. No matter how long your design goes, I can only see this. So you can design longer in Axure, and then you could make that scrollable. I'm not doing that right now, but that's something we could do. And then from there, your interactions are interactions. So I could say, when someone taps this button, set the panel state of the dynamic panel we didn't bother naming to state 2. And just so I can show you what like a little mobile thing might look like, let's imagine that it slides left. Okay, let's give that a try. Refresh. I need a complete refresh. Okay, here we go. So again, you're not seeing it right now as a mobile thing. I could make an interface here, or I could just make the screen this wide, and I didn't make it scrollable. But the idea is that here's the button, and now you know, if someone, or I could make it swipeable. So I could go into this, and let's put it just as an example on this text. I could say on swipe, where is it? Oh, that's right. Swipe's got to be a dynamic panel. So let's quickly turn this into a dynamic panel. Boom. Okay. So in that case, that's a left swipe. On swipe left, set panel state to state 2. Set the dynamic panel. What am I doing here? Set this dynamic panel to state 2 with an animate left. There we go. All right. So I'm going to have to replicate a swipe with my mouse, but I've done this a bunch of times. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. So I pretended with my mouse that I swiped on that particular area, and that gave me the next window in what would be some sort of mobile thing. So in the old days, we used to either put a picture of a phone here, and people interacted with this in a web browser, pretending it was a phone, or you can actually pull up Axure prototypes on your phone. The downside is that Axure prototypes are very fixed widths. In that sense, it's almost like an artboard. So if you're designing for this phone, you have to have the exact viewport ready to go. If I then open this up on a bigger phone, I'm going to have a strip of bacon and a whole bunch of empty space. It doesn't scale or redraw itself. It's not truly responsive design. I don't think the chat is working. No, I see it. Chantel says loading states. I'm not sure I would call that loading states. Chantel says there's more of sliding things, loading components, loading states. Yeah, I do see the chat. I'm just not sure what you mean. So that's usually how I recommend designing for mobile. I would end up having some sort of fixed bit at the top for the top of the app. You may or may not have a fixed bottom piece. You know, like if you think about some apps have a fixed bottom navigation. So you might have a fixed top, you might have a fixed bottom, and then all the stuff in the middle can scroll. So you can do that. And then what happens is your entire prototype happens on one page. You're not going, hey, go from page 1 to page 2, because that wouldn't happen in a mobile app. Your whole screen wouldn't go white and you're waiting for the thing to load. It would happen seamlessly. And the way it would happen seamlessly is just by using the dynamic panel, where each state is a different screen that your mobile app might have, and you are just jumping or animating between these screens. So if you had a navigation system built into your app, you'd be able to say, oh, when someone clicks the account thing, we jump to the state for the account. And you can name these states. So and that'll help you later, because you're like, state 1, state 2, what the hell was that? So this could be the account settings state. Now it's the account settings panel. That is wrong. This would be my mobile viewport panel. And then I can go and name a state. Rename. Maybe my state is account settings. And that way, later on, when I start building out more things the mobile app does, I know exactly what state of the panel I want to show in my little window. Judith, hey, how have you been? It's been a long while since I've been able to join your awesome events. Yeah, makes you miss Axure. I miss Axure too. So again, how to build a mobile app in Axure is definitely, I used to run an entire full day training course on it. That was 8 hours, including lunch and breaks. So kind of 6 hours of content. I do not have it on YouTube at this time, but it can be done. And it's really just a trick of dynamic panels, where you're either just jumping to a different state of that panel, living inside this viewport, or you are animating, especially if you're trying to make it feel like people are going deeper or forward into something or backwards out of something. Pippi Jeans, got it. Answered my next question as well about responsiveness on different devices. Would need more control there. Bring my own phone. Makes sense. Right. Axure does have something they call adaptive design, but it is not going to help you. If you're really making kind of a mobile app looking thing, you need the mobile app looking. You need to build the mobile app like this. The adaptive design, you could try it. And I have lessons for this on YouTube. So let's say, for example, we've got heading 1. Sorry, my drag and drop is being so funky today. Grumpy mouse. Here we go. Heading 1. Let's just make some ugly stuff for fun. Heading 1. Giant picture. Block of text. Big wide block of text, because this is our desktop version. Okay, so let's just grab these things and just quickly line them up. Okay, let's pretend that this is our web page, ugly as it is. Now, let's imagine we need a phone version. Key, let's add a phone version. This is version phone, and let's pretend it's going to be an iPhone 11. Go. Now, this is our base version, which for us is going to be our desktop. This is our phone version. And Axure says, hey, you're coloring outside the lines. And we can go, oh, crap. Let's move this over here. Let's move this over here. And in fact, let's make it a little smaller for people who are on phones. And center it up. And let's wrap this one differently. People are on a phone. And let's move this over here. So again, look, this isn't great design. This is just meant to be an example. So we have our web version. You could have a tablet version. This would be your phone version. And that way, if we change something, these can be set up to inherit. So if we say, we've got this thing. Obviously, I didn't center it, so I would need to say centered text and fix this, so I didn't do that. But let's just go the fast way. Here we go. Now go back to our phone version. It changes the text. So we have consistent text, but we might say, oh, that's really wide for the phone. I don't like the look for that. So let's wrap it this way. Let's center all of these and move them over here. And now let's space them out a bit. Oops, stop that. There we go. So then again, hypothetically, you've got this base version, you have this phone version, and if you were to open up, if you publish this Axure prototype and you open it on an iPhone 11, it should show you the phone version. The Axure adaptive views are supposed to automatically adjust for whatever kind of device you've opened it up on. So let's go back to here and let's do a fresh preview rather. So here we're forcing it to pretend it's a phone. That's from this drop list over here. So we could say, give me my base or give me my iPhone version and let's pretend. So it gives you a little like floating finger here. So if this scrolled, you could make it scroll. Or I can say adapt. And so usually, I don't know why it's not switching to this. I shouldn't be getting adaptive right now. I should be getting the full screen. So that's a little funky. I would be writing to support about that. But you can kind of see where this is going, where you can create one design and you'll be able to lay it out and slightly adjust it for different sizes. I kind of like it. What would you say the advantage of dynamic thing is versus this adaptive view? I don't know what dynamic thing is, but you can use dynamic panels if you mean dynamic panels. Dynamic panels are just an Axure widget that you can use anywhere. We can put a dynamic panel in here if we want, and we can have different states of that panel if we want. So for example, a use of dynamic panels can be seen in Axure's default UI patterns. Let's grab one of those quickly. So this is an Axure pre-made, oh, it's way too big. This is ridiculous. This is not going to fit into our adaptive world. Let's erase it. Hold on. Base. Giant slideshow. What's it look like on a phone? Giant slideshow. But hypothetically, we could go in and we could say, hey, this has an adaptive view as well. When this shows up on the phone, I want it to be, let's take the whole piece here. I want it to be over here. And I want it to be this wide. I'm having a not precise mouse day. I want it to be this wide. So, refresh. So, slideshow. That's a dynamic panel. Slide 2, slide 3. Slide 2, slide 1. And if we said, give me the iPhone version. Okay, this didn't wrap very well. We'd have to fix that. But slide 2, slide 3, slide 2, slide 1. And I could also build that with swiping. I don't know if this swipes. Yep, they built it to swipe. Swipe. Swipe back. Swipe back. So you can have dynamic panels in your adaptive views because a dynamic panel is just an Axure element. Axure calls these widgets. So a dynamic panel just allows you to take up space and put multiple different content things in there. So for example, this is what slide 1 looked like. This is slide 2. This is slide 3, and we could redesign these. Right now, they're all very similar, and it was hard to tell them apart. So let's say, for example, slide 2 is chartreuse, and slide 3 is, I don't know, blue. That's difficult to look at, but just stick with me here. And let's go back. Okay. Save, refresh, slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. They're using a fade between each of them. So that's with a fade. You could also do a slide, which would make it look more like a carousel. And of course, this also works on swipe. Swipe. I can't swipe past 3. It doesn't wrap around, but you can turn on wrapping. So slide 3 wraps around to 1. So yeah, these are all of the Axure widgets or elements in the library can be used, anywhere. You can make custom libraries like with your brand style and stuff like that. Doesn't work exactly like Figma, but you can try to approximate it, and I always hope newer versions will be better. But you've got shapes, you've got images, you've got text, you've got lines, and then you have some of these more specialized elements like form fields, the repeaters, the dynamic panel. We didn't talk about the hotspot. I don't use the menus and tables, and I don't use the ones on the bottom. So there's a lot here I don't even use ever because everything else takes care of it for me. So yeah, we're just about out of time. We hung out for 2 hours. We talked about Axure. We talked about some basic, some intermediate, and some advanced techniques. And we talked about how for a lot of things in Axure, the learning curve is not that steep. It's just about putting a little bit of time into it to go through the lessons. And if you can learn Figma, I think you can learn Axure. Where does Axure get difficult? when you start messing with conditional logic. As soon as you need to say, well, this only happens if this other thing happened or is happening behind the scenes, then if for some people it starts to feel like, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. But certainly the wireframing is easy, the styling is easy, the click-through models are easy, the repeater's not that bad. It's really once you start getting into some conditional logic that some people especially, I find that this is hardest for art school artists. If you come from art and you've never had to do any coding or a lot of heavy logic stuff, then you're like, I don't get it. What am I doing here and why? Because you have to think, Axure has to break down every micro moment. If you want something to move from here to here, you have to tell Axure to do that. If you want something to move by a math puzzle, you've got to build the math puzzle. I have done that. I have done, when this happens, move this 50 pixels away from this other thing. Well, that's a little more advanced because it's not an exact coordinate. It's relative to something else. Ooh, math. So, there are some things in Axure that feel like programming. A lot of Axure no-code stuff comes from JavaScript. So people who've done some front-end dev learn Axure incredibly fast. People who've never had to do that stuff and weren't that strong in math or logic, and that's lots of people, so don't feel badly, especially the art school artists I find, or natural artists, have never had to think about these micro moments like this, and then it's harder. They can still learn it, just takes a little more practice because it's less familiar. Any other last questions before we wrap up for today? Today is Monday, so please remember that tomorrow we will have Q&A AMA, the usual Ask Me Anything, and we do have a special guest tomorrow. We've got John N.A. Brown, who some of you have seen on the show before. In my opinion, one of the smartest people alive, so bring your tough questions. All right, so we've hung out for just over 2 hours. I hope you'll share this out to people who are Axure-curious or wondering what happens if Figma ever goes poof. I think Axure is a great option. I always hope that they don't go in some wacky direction. I hope Axure 11 will be an upgrade and not a downgrade. Axure is not terribly expensive. As of when I'm recording this, I think the lower level license is about $20-something a month, American, 26, 29. And then I think the higher level license is $40-something a month. But that's, depending upon the size of your team, or if you're a freelancer, it's not the wildest amount of money on the planet. It's not Adobe Creative Suite money. So yes, I am paying for it. They don't pay me. I think they should pay me, but they don't. So I recommend Axure no matter what at this time. If Figma ever does Axure better than Axure does Axure, I'll switch. Like my loyalty is to the best tool for the job. So that's it. So I guess I will wrap up and flame us out of here. Thanks to everybody who joined for part of the show or all of the show. It'll be archived on the YouTube channel. Patreons will get it for 2 weeks, and then it'll be available to the public. So enjoy, and I hope to catch you all soon. Thanks. Bye.